Before we actually cover the insects and mites that attack ornamental trees and shrubs, let's step back for a moment and discuss the usage of plants around our landscapes. Many are beginning to decry our urban landscapes as using too many resources, such as fertilizer and water. Others point out that a lot of pesticides are being used to maintain our urban landscapes, and this should be reconsidered. So, we need to discuss the benefits of our ornamental plants and how we can make them more healthy with fewer inputs. We could spend several modules, perhaps an entire course, discussing the benefits of trees and shrubs in our landscapes, but we have limited time. Ornamental plants definitely have the ability to moderate extreme environments. Being plants, they produce oxygen, sequester carbon, and help clean or remove pollution. Their foliage reduces rain impacts on surfaces, and the roots help with infiltration of water and reduces surface runoff. Trees and shrubs reduce sound levels and can greatly reduce sun glare from buildings and other hard surfaces. Of course, plants produce seeds and host insects important to birds, and trees and shrubs are often used as nesting sites. Here is an aerial view of a typical Ohio suburban development. It is easy to see that there are many different landscapes with all levels of management. Such landscapes are a major part of the investment in a piece of property, and such landscapes provide many of the previously mentioned environmental benefits. However, there are also lifestyle and social benefits associated with our landscapes. There are hundreds of studies on how environments help or harm humans. There is no doubt that open green spaces are preferred to highly structured environments of brick, steel, and stone. One only has to look around such highly urbanized areas, and there will always be balconies or rooftops with plants being maintained by someone. Studies have shown that pleasant-looking landscapes have a calming effect, tend to reduce aggression and violence, and seem to improve the attention and concentration of children. Maintenance of green areas provides mental and physical benefits, provides pride in a community, and provides space for recreation. While it is obvious that we can make all kinds of improvements in our individual home landscapes, people take great pride in their landscapes, and the curb appeal of a home can greatly increase its value. As we cover the pests that attack these plants, we will learn that we can provide this great look with minimal need for pest management. In most regions of the world, there are increasing efforts to invest in and create green spaces in densely urban areas. Such areas reduce crime, improve attitudes, and require less air conditioning of the buildings themselves. I'm always amused when people try to do what they think is the right thing by being more environmentally responsible. This New Mexico landscape was typical for this particular neighborhood, and the attempt was to use native plants to reduce water usage. Studies have shown that such landscapes are actually just using desert-looking plants, most of which are non-native, and these plants will use all the water that they can get. Did you notice in this picture that each plant has a little moat around it? Each of those moats has a trickle irrigation tube in it to provide water for the plant. Also, did you notice the privacy fence? What do you think's behind that? Yes, the swimming pool. Oh, but also a lush green lawn with pretty flowers and shrubs surrounding it. Where do you think the residents spend their time? Yes, it's in that backyard. There are numerous economic influences of urban landscapes. For the property owner, proper landscaping can reduce heating and air conditioning costs. Any real estate agent will tell you that the curb appeal for most houses is largely determined by the look of the landscape. Properly placed plants can provide privacy and improve security. Municipal landscaping can help in reducing maintenance costs, yet improve tourist impressions. Landscapes include those seen in parks and sport facilities, which are all improved with nice-looking and well-maintained landscapes. An often untold economic benefit of landscapes is that provided by the landscape maintenance industries. In 2002, the United States arborists determined that tree and shrub maintenance alone was worth $9.5 billion in revenues. A more recent report estimated that the total landscape care industries in the United States was worth $93 billion in revenues, and over 1 million people were being employed. Most people are truly amazed when you compare this industry with some of the larger agricultural production areas, such as corn, which is worth nearly $53 million per year, the soybean crop worth nearly $41 million, and the wheat crop worth less than $10 million per year. The landscape maintenance industries have continually risen over the last decade, and predictions are this will continue. Most of this maintenance is offered by individuals and small companies. What is more astounding is that many estimate that the professional maintenance companies only maintain 30% of the urban landscapes. The other landscapes are usually maintained by their owners. This drives the do-it-yourself or DIY industries. The landscape maintenance industries are only part of the economic equation. Other companies supply the annual and perennial flowers as well as the trees and shrubs that are installed in landscapes. Again, these industries are in the $40 billion per year range in the United States. As before, most of these nurseries and outlets are considered to be small businesses and are operated by individuals. Urban and suburban landscapes are much more complex than forests, where only 3 to 10 species of trees may dominate the habitat, or even prairies where diversity is greater but still not as great as found in urban landscapes. Most neighborhoods have landscapes that use up to 100 species of plants and differing cultivars of those plants. Urban landscapes also include open areas such as road right-of-ways, river and stream borders, as well as parks, athletic fields, cemeteries, and airports. Urban landscapes are often criticized as taking away land usage that could be used for better purposes. Let's get a better perspective of where urban land usage compares to other land usage here in the United States. Periodically, government agencies try to estimate how land is being used. It is obvious that field crops, grasslands used for pastures and ranges, and forests comprise the majority of land acreage use here in the United States. In this report, in 2002, urban land use was deliberately separated out, and as you can see, the total land usage is around 3% of the total. So why all the complaints about urban sprawl and increasing urbanization of land? Frankly, I'm at a loss for an answer other than this urban land is where everybody lives, so people see it more often than other land usage areas. I really like this NASA map that was put together using satellite surveys using various light spectra that can separate out turf from other uses. Turf usually surrounds tree and shrub usage, so I think it is a valid measure of likely urban landscapes also. This map makes it pretty easy to see that turf is concentrated in major urban areas and major roadways. And it doesn't take much to realize that turf and associated urban landscapes really doesn't take up that much land surface area across the United States. So what about the biodiversity of urban landscapes? In Europe, ecologists have begun to look at this biodiversity, and they were generally surprised when urban landscapes often had greater biological diversity than forests and prairies. In turfgrass alone, non-target studies have found that managed turf can harbor 20,000 to 50,000 arthropods per square meter. There are some recent studies that have also confirmed that native trees and shrubs have many more insects, mites, and vertebrates associated with them when compared to non-native plants. Finally, recent studies here in Ohio of abandoned properties in the Cleveland area that are being converted to other uses has indicated very high biological diversity can be present in such lands. In two recent studies, one by Peck et al. In New York and one by Digman et al. Here in Ohio, between 20,000 and 50,000 arthropods per square meter of turf were found. Most of these are mites, but there are many other things living in the turf: predators, herbivores, fungivores, detritivores, and similar organisms. Unfortunately, most of these are microscopic animals, but if you think of turf as being little trees, these tiny animals are not much different in size than you standing next to a tree. In short, managed turf harbors quite a load of microscopic arthropods as well as other animals such as earthworms, nematodes, and mollusks. Landscape beds have similar populations. As far as I'm concerned, the real issue with understanding the biodiversity found in urban landscapes is that we are used to seeing large animals such as deer, raccoons, and birds. We tend to ignore small plants, animals, fungi, and microbes that make up the bulk of this planet's biodiversity. Turfgrass alone with associated trees, shrubs, perennials, and annuals is a remarkably diverse habitat, and this biodiversity helps aid in its environmental tolerance and resilience. Now let's turn our attention to plant growth, development, and allocation of resources. All green plants acquire water and essential nutrients from the soil, and through the process of photosynthesis, they capture sun energy and carbon dioxide to make sugars. These sugars are the food energy that the plant can then use to grow larger and maintain existing tissues. If there is a surplus of this food, many plants will store it in their tissues and roots. When adequate energy is present, most plants will bloom and produce seeds. Of interest is that many trees and shrubs may actually excessively bloom and try to produce seeds after a period of stress. Of course, most plants produce defensive chemicals, which are also increased during the times of stress or damage. Folks now often talk about plant health. So what is plant health? Many describe a healthy plant as being dark green and thick. Others envision that the landscape should be weed-free, as they have heard that weeds rob other plants of nutrients and space. In reality, weeds usually occur where there is already an open space or bare ground is exposed. While we don't like seeing insects or diseases on plants, the reality is that both insects and diseases use plants for their growth, development, and reproduction. Most plants that have sufficient nutrients and space can tolerate considerable pest pressure. I kind of like the idea that healthy plants tend to grow at moderate rates and they can readily recover from short-term environmental stresses or periodic pest attacks. Dr. Dan Herms, while working at OARDC in Worcester, Ohio, investigated the relationships between fertilization, allocation of defensive chemicals, and pest attack. The following few points are from one of his talks on this topic. In this presentation, he pointed out that fast-growing plants allocate resources differently than slow-growing plants. Fast-growing plants make more leaves and fewer roots compared to slow-growing plants that make fewer leaves but form more roots. Also, fast-growing plants produce fewer protective chemicals than slow-growing plants. Of interest was that both plants had relatively high photosynthetic rates. They also did different things with the sugars that they made from that photosynthesis. In trees, especially, Dr. Herms and his students found that plants with poor nutrition seem to make more defensive chemicals than plants experiencing high nutrition rates. This is really important as many homeowners and professionals alike think that feeding plants makes them healthier. In reality, plants may be like people. That is, getting too much food can be bad for your health. Phenols are common protective chemicals produced by plants. In this study, there was a high correlation in the reduction of phenolic compounds as the fertility rates increased. So, again, a plant given too much nitrogen is likely to grow fast but not produce protective chemicals that will assist it to fight off disease and insect attack. Conversely, Dr. Herms and his students found out that plants given increased nutrition seem to put more of that nutrition into the foliage eaten by pests. In this study, it is very obvious that gypsy moth caterpillars grew much more rapidly when fed leaves from plants given higher fertilization rates. In summary, plants given higher fertilizer rates make fewer protective chemicals, and their tissues are more nutritious for insect herbivores. Our current thinking is that plants may need some extra resources during their establishment phase, but once established, only sparingly applied fertilizers are recommended. We'll discuss more about the interrelationships of plant nutrition, general maintenance practices, and pest pressures later on in this course.